Doug is a famous designer. People seek him at Stanford, at IDEO. He's known world around in terms of having a unique, different sense of design. And part of that design is sometimes adding extra steps into the process. He was so kind to offer up his time and allow us to inject a little good friction with him today to actually participate and attend this virtual launch party. So I'd like us all to meet Doug. Doug, thank you for joining us. And I think, Dave, you have a few questions based on us writing the book and doing some research that you wanted to ask Doug.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Doug, I've got to let you know that when I was putting the words together for this story about you, I cried. And I found it an incredible emotional experience and the way that you tell the story is very emotional as well, because clearly it touches very deeply to you. And actually I want to show people here a couple of pictures. So this here is a picture from how you decorated one of the MRI machines, and this is you having a whole load of fun with some of the hospital staff. But when you introduced this bunch of friction to this process that previously it was cold and it was heartless, but it was frictionless, and you added friction, you added extra elements, you were asking people to do more work. Did you get resistance from like the hospital staff, from people at GE? Was asking people to do more a problem?
Boy, what a great question, and thank you guys for inviting me to be part of this. Yeah, to be honest with you, I was getting like friction from everywhere. I was pretty nervous about it all, and because mainly, a lot of times they're like, especially GE itself is just like, this is super sophisticated $3 million MRI scanner. It's got to be clean, and you know what I mean? It's got to be this way. We don't want to mess with that. And then also from the hospital side, it was like, we want to project this professionalism and this, that we're serious about healthcare. But boy, I started talking with the child life specialists. So these are the staff in the hospital that work with the families to get kids through surgery or through a radiology experience. And they have this little wagon that they pull down the hallway, and they got toys and stuff to try to make this super sterile medical environment into something that the children can just comprehend. So boy, when we started working with the kids advisory boards in the hospital and all of that, we could see where even adding a couple of these other different steps in, I still remember one of the technologists saying, our biggest challenge is getting the kids past the threshold. And I was like, what's that? And they said, coming into this scary machine, getting them up on the table, holding still, ready to go in. And that takes like 15, 20 minutes. And then also if they can't hold still, then they have to bring the anesthesiologist in to sedate them. And they go, we have the pirate ship, and when we give the little felt hat to the boy and he runs down the hallway and then he wants to walk the plank to get up on the table, we almost can't start the scanner fast enough. So this step of getting them past the threshold, which isn't an official step, it's just how you get the patient on the table, went from 15 minutes down to almost nothing. And then also the technologists that are now playing a role had some really fun parts they could do. So we tried to give them scripts and different things. And I remember in the pirate room, we put the monkey on, it looks like they're on a rope. So the graphic is on like a thick piece of cardboard that's just kind of the rope at the top is screwed to the wall so the monkey swings. And the technologist will swing this monkey who has a pirate, patch on his eye on the wall. And then the little child will come in and go, we've been looking for the monkey all day and can't find him. And of course, the technologist is looking in the wrong place in the room. And of course, the kid sees this gigantic monkey, swinging on the wall. And they go, oh, that's amazing that you found it. And then they'll say, when you're finished with your scan, the monkey might still be swinging. Well, then the child goes in the scanner, and of course, the monkey stops. And then the technologist in a separate room comes out, just swings the monkey, hits the button, and the child comes out of the scanner. And of course, the monkey's still swinging. It's sometimes as simple as that, as just giving them a goal. So some of these extra steps and some of these things actually ended up making the productivity so much better. In fact, I just got a call from the director of radiology in Pittsburgh Children's, Kathleen Capson, and she said our 16-day backlog for MRI scans has gone down to 0. So when you talk about, yes, you're adding a little more friction into this, the small elements of the system, the overall going from 16-day backlog to 0 is amazing. You can see what the productivity is like in that department, and a lot of that is just respecting the family, respecting these children, and treating them the way that maybe they should be treated.
Yeah, now this is a really different approach from, I mean, if you think about the way that the process that you used for design normally, and then this, you were bringing in storytelling skills. You were looking at experience design rather than physical product design. That's like a whole different skill set. Did you have to, how did you feel picking up that different approach, that different way of doing things?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think, I needed help. I couldn't do it myself. So even in the reading, I brought in the Children's Museum here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the Betty Brinn, and worked with their staff, and they're making things educational and safe and fun, and just bringing in some expertise learning specialists that are saying, at these different levels of the child's development, these are the things that they can scale. These are the things that this is how they think. So bringing in these experts really helped me. But I'll tell you what the key was for me to get kind of past maybe some of the friction was co-collaborating with the people you're doing it for. So I think a lot of times in business, we think we're so smart. We got all this research behind us. We got all this new technology, and we're going to make this for what we think you want. And what I spent a lot of time with these kids and with the staff is just brainstorming with them and co-collaborating and coming up with these small little prototypes and seeing if they like those. I remember one prototype session, we had a little foam core scaled room. The kids were doing the sketches of what they wanted it to be. I think it was like a fantasy island or something awesome. And then they taped their sketches on the walls on the little scale room. And then these kids would take their phone and they would take it down by the door and they do a little video and they just rotate their phone like this. And when you looked at the video, because they brought it down to the eye view, it looked like a real room, even though it was just their sketches. So I'm watching them and they're typing on it. I'm going, well, I don't know what they're doing. So I go over to them and I say, what are you doing? And they go, oh, well, I'm sending it to my friends. So I had like a dozen kids in this workshop with me coming up with these ideas, and each of them sent it to like 20 friends. So I had hundreds of input on this room in like 20 minutes. So yeah. I think co-collaboration and just being humble enough to have your end users in this process with you, really using design thinking is really, really important. But there's definitely a humbleness to that of not having the right answers and going in and being a little bit comfortable in ambiguity. I don't know. And that's not the usual way business works. They want to have Six Sigma, we've got the, and being a GE, I was used to that world.
Yeah, and there's also, I think what you're talking about there is going beyond the traditional approach to design thinking, which I find that the empathy part of design thinking tends to engage groups that actually come up, they've got their own assumptions of what's possible, and they kind of stop. And almost when you're engaging groups of people who aren't trained, who are just in the public, they don't tend to come up with things that are very imaginative because they've got too many assumptions. And what you did was you activated people's imaginations to go beyond that, to come up with something new, which I think is beyond design thinking. The approach that you did is closer to Imagineering, the Walt Disney approach.
Yeah, no, that's true. In fact, I brought in a really cool guy, Bruce from Disney, on one of the workshops that I was actually having in San Francisco with a hospital. And I remember talking to him on the phone just to see if he was a good match to come in for the workshop. He was in LA to fly in. And so I said, so Bruce, what are you up to? And he goes, I'm making magical snow. And I was like, what? And he goes, well, I have a very special snowman character and we can't have regular snow. And I go, oh my God, this guy's perfect. So we brought him in for a 3-day workshop. And of course he was working on, is it Olaf in Frozen? Yeah. So he was working on the magical snow for this. And I just thought, so we brought in these analogous inspiration from a bunch of different places to work on this. So this kind of ensemble of co-creators that we brought in was what really made it special, I think, for sure. And it was a lot of fun, to be honest with you. It was the funnest I've ever had in my 30 plus years at GE was on this project.
Hey, Doug, thank you so much. Every time I hear the story, I get really inspired. And I know Doug, you're sort of up against a timeline because you're actually stepping out from a workshop right now that you're actually leading. So I want to thank you for taking time. I do have one final question for you, Doug, and that is really about this idea of what key lessons would you tell designers who are actually thinking about making things more difficult, adding more steps in order to improve the process, and also making it more difficult potentially for the customers, for their bosses, for their companies? What type of advice might you give them?
What a great question. I think for me, I would say, and you all have probably heard, I think it's IDEO, this, fail early, fail often. And I would take that into and rotate that around into learn early, learn cheap. Is I think one thing that I would do is I would, when it comes to this kind of the frictionless things, is come up with these really low fidelity prototype. So the fidelity of your idea and your prototype that you can share with somebody are congruent with each other. And then as the idea gets further along, your prototype gets further along. I think that is really good. That really helped me on a lot of things. And there were so many times when I would put a prototype in front of someone just as a prop to get more empathy, to be honest with you. And then they would say things like, I know that's what I said, but you know what I mean? And I think that is what's going to really help you. If you can put something for them to interact with, for them to view or complete some of these things together, and as early as possible to get those really tight iteration loops that you can do versus a big one at the end where then you fail very late and it's very expensive. So move that early. That would probably be one of my main things.
That's great. Just to recap some things I'm taking away from that. Oftentimes talk about the idea of failing, but I love the reframe, which is it's about learning, and learning oftentimes is trial and error. So you're never gonna, if you're trying to learn a new skill or a new competence, there are going to be times when you're going to have to fail in order to figure it out, right? My wife was doing ping pong, and I'm sure early on she told me she could not return the serve, and now she can. But that required lots of times of missing the ball, and I think that is true. And so we do talk about that in the book, about the idea that to get good at something, it takes a lot of energy and effort and a lot of friction, but that's good friction to build that type of confidence. I think the other thing you said is the design process, adding a lot of steps in the design process, as long as they're low fidelity, that also adds a lot of good friction in the beginning, but I think it leads to a incrementally better result versus sort of one and done and hoping that the big idea works on its first pass. So Doug, thank you so much for always inspiring us. Every time I read that, even this is probably the 20th time I read that story, when I hear, can we come back tomorrow? I just imagine being that girl, and I get choked up too. And I read it this morning. Actually, I was reading out loud to time it out, see how long it takes, and I got teary again. So it's such a powerful story of the idea of having more involvement, more action, more paint to actually create an even better experience. So everyone, let's thank Doug for his time, because he actually stepped out of a workshop to do this for us. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
My pleasure, guys. My pleasure. Thank you so much. And congratulations on the awesome book.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for being one of the inspirations for it right from the beginning. Thanks, Doug.
You're welcome.